Hello, and welcome back to Dev++. Today's episode is going to be about building a JSON REST API with Python and Flask. So let's jump to it. So in today's episode, we're going to follow the steps to be able to build that JSON REST API with Python and Flask. We're going to start by creating the project folder and creating the Python project using virtualenv and pip as a package manager. We're going to install the dependencies, create a demo project, run the project, and create additional routes for a REST API. Things that we're not going to cover in this video, we're going to be pending for other episodes. It's going to be doing a database connection from the API, user authentication, and data validation, right? At the end, we're going to push the project to the GitHub repo and, some closing remarks. For following this video, you will need a little bit of a basic knowledge of Python and web architecture, basic knowledge for terminal application. I use Fish Shell for terminal. I know the default for macOS is Bash, but I use Fish. I recommend it. It's pretty cool actually. An IDE or text editor for Python. I use PyCharm Community Edition. In an HTTP client, I use Insomnia, for doing HTTP requests. Also, you will need a web browser just for test some of the API responses. So let's go ahead and start. I'm gonna open my terminal. I have a workspace folder for all my projects. I'm gonna create a folder called Python Flask REST API, right? So I'm gonna cd into this folder right here. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a Python project using virtual environment, right? Virtual environment is a tool that is used in Python in order to create like a project and in order to sandbox the dependencies for that specific project, right? In this case, I'm going to create a specific folder called likewise like the package, right? If you're using Node.js, you're familiarized with this. It's similar to Node modules. We're going to check out the content of that folder a little bit in a few minutes. So just create the virtual environment, and then the second step is activating this virtual environment, right? Inside the venv folder, the bin subfolder, there's going to be a script called activate. If you're using Bash, it's usually called activate without the extension. But as I'm using Fish, there is a .fish file there for activating the virtual environment. So you can see here that now it's activated. That way, when you use a virtual environment, one of the cool things is that you can install packages in that virtual environment specifically, and not having to pollute your system-wide packages, which is pretty convenient, right? So now that we have the virtual environment, I'm gonna check my Python version. I'm just gonna make sure that it's there. I'm gonna check my pip version, which is the package manager. We're good there. So I'm gonna go ahead and start by installing Flask, right? As that Flask is being installed, I'm gonna open my IDE, PyCharm. I'm gonna open the project folder. Going to my workspace, selecting the folder and open up, right? As I was saying, there is a folder for the build environment, specific subfolders. One is bin to put all the executable binaries that are installed by default by the virtual environment, such as Python or pip. And then it also installed like the binary that are installed with each one of the packages. Right now we install Flask, and Flask has a binary, so that's why it's here. And then there's a subfolder for all the actual libraries that is installing on the virtual environment, right? So one more step is a really good practice if you're working with Python to create something that is called a requirements file, where you put all the libraries that you're installing, right? We just install Flask. We don't have this requirements files yet. I'm going to create it, requirements.txt, right? And one thing that you do usually for starting the first version of the requirements is just like a freeze. It's basically like taking a snapshot of the install libraries that you have right now. Just put it on the file, right? If you see here, this was the one that we installed. We installed Flask. For sure installed these dependencies just because some of the packages, they have additional dependencies that they need to install. So those are the ones that are here. Cool. So let's start by we're gonna create a new file called hello.py. That's where we're gonna put all the routes and all the information, and we're gonna jump start to start creating our API, right? So we're gonna start by importing the Flask symbol, right? We're gonna start by creating an app from that symbol, and we're gonna start by defining like one specific route. Hello, it's just like Python function. We're gonna return hello world, right? Here we're gonna decorate this with a route decorator just to indicate which is gonna be the path to access to this route, right? Perfect. Let me double check the have it right. By the way, I'm following the tutorial that is on the Flask quick start guide. So just to let you know, it's a pretty cool tutorial. So you make sure to follow that if you want to follow up on information. We're just gonna put the name of the file here. And then for starting our development server for testing this specific micro app, right, that we're building, Flask already has a command line. Remember the binary we install with when we install the dependency? It has a command that is already there because we're in the virtual environment, right? So that command, you can run the file where you define your app symbol, and then he understands that this is going to be a server, a development server that you're going to run using this app definition. Right, so I'm just gonna indicate that. Just put the command --app, the name of the module, this case hello.py. We're gonna enable the debug mode, and we're gonna tell the subcommand run just to start the development server. So if we start this, we just copy and paste this route. It's gonna start like a local server in the 5000 by default. You can change the port with a different parameter, but here we are. Right, the first route is going to be a hello world. As the default is a get request, so it's going to be answered straight ahead by this route. So that way we have our first working route. Good. So we're going to build a JSON REST API, right? In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create like a local variable called task, where we're going to store some specific tasks that we're going to create for the project. This is gonna be stored in memory, right? For now, we're not gonna cover database connections, storing data in databases and stuff like that, just for simplicity, to keep this video short. But we're gonna cover that in other episodes, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create some views. I'm gonna put this task view, plural, right? Let me put like a placeholder there for the definition. I'm gonna indicate that this is gonna be the /task route for plural operations, and I'm gonna create a different one for singular, right? And indicating that I'm gonna put the ID on the route, right? For doing like detailed views and things like that. I'm gonna explain a little bit that in just a second, right? So when you build a REST API around a resource, in this case, a task, you usually have to model like 4 type of operations. If you're familiar with this, it's called like a CRUD, C-R-U-D, for creating, reading, updating, and deleting operations, right? So that's what we're gonna implement here. So I'm gonna put like a little bit of comment here. So we're gonna implement the CRUD for tasks. Remember, CRUD stands for C is create task. R is for reading. It's gonna be reading a task or reading all the tasks, right? We're gonna implement that in both routes, right? And then we're gonna have the update. and the delete the task. So remember, one thing to notice when you're modeling a REST API is usually CRUD operations are mapped to HTTP methods, right? So when you're creating a task, usually people uses post methods. When you're reading, people usually, or developers usually model this as an HTTP GET request, right? For updating, it's usually a put or a patch. And for deleting is the HTTP delete method, right? So one thing to do here is that we're gonna implement some of these operations in the detailed task view and some operations in the plural tasks view, right? One really cool thing there is new for Flask, other than the CLI, the command line that is included in the package now, is there is very flexible for understanding and representing JSON requests, right? If you send a request to this development server that it has an application JSON content type, it recognizes that it's a JSON and it creates like a very cool method for pulling the JSON from the request easily. Same thing when you return in one of these views, you return either a dictionary or a list. It automatically knows that you're trying to return a JSON and it sets the content type for you, right? So we're gonna take advantage of that. Before doing that, we got to indicate to the route that we're gonna also support additional methods besides the get, which is the default, right? So for this plural view, we're gonna support get, right? And I think that for now it's just gonna be, yeah, get, and also we're gonna support post for creating a new task, right? For the detail method, the detail route, just copy and paste this because I'm a little bit lazy. We're gonna support the get for get a single one. We're gonna support the put for updating a single one, and we're gonna also support the delete method for deleting a specific task, right? So let's start implementing this, right? First of all, as I was saying, we're gonna use this list that I defined here at the top. So let's start by doing this, right? We're gonna use the global variable task, global for the module. This is what we use so we can start like referencing this task, because otherwise, just it will be like creating a new variable there. We're gonna import the object request from the Flask package, just because we need to be able to do things like this. If request is a method equals get, so we're gonna have to do some things, and if it's post, we're gonna have to do different type of things, right? Remember, we're not gonna talk about validation here or authentication, about who can do this or who can't. We're just gonna put whatever the user is sending into the list, and that's how we're gonna move forward, just to keep the things simple, right? So as we talk about, if you send a get request to this task, I should just return all the tasks so they can be printed as a JSON. Very important. Normally, when you transform an object on Python to JSON, every value has to have a representation on JSON, meaning that strings are strings, ints are numbers, booleans are booleans, and so on. So if you include like a weird object, or object that you created on Python, you have to specify a way to serialize that into JSON. Otherwise, it's just gonna pop an error, because it's not gonna know how to serialize a value that it doesn't know, right? It's not a primitive value. So back to this. If the method is paused, so we're gonna take the data from the request. Remember, it has like a really cool get JSON and some JSONs data, right? We're gonna assign an ID just to identify a task, right? We're gonna assign that, I will say like the position, simply the position on the list, right? For now. right? Once we get that, we're just gonna append this data and return the data itself, just to show that really cool ID that we just created, right? Ideally, you have to create like a unique ID from a database or something similar, but again, we just want to make it simple, right? Similar here in the detail view, we said that we're gonna support get. Let me copy and paste just to make it faster. We're gonna support get, put, and delete, right? Get, put, and delete, right? So let's start implementing this. First of all, this task ID, even if we pass like a number to it, it's gonna be read as a string, just because that's how HTTP works. So I'm gonna create like a local variable here, transforming this to an int, right? So if I want to get a task by ID, I guess I would just access this using the task ID, right? If I want to update values on a specific task, what I can do is get the data. Same thing here. I'm just gonna get the data. Something similar. Again, copy and paste in here. I'm gonna call this the new task, right? I'm gonna look the old task by accessing the task with the index or the ID that I'm sending, ID quote unquote, right? And I'm just gonna update the old task object with the new task, right? And then simply I'm gonna just return the old task object, right? That's pretty much, I think that will work, right? Or we're just gonna test it in a few minutes. And if I want to just delete a task, right? I'm not gonna do any validation. Probably we should first check that the value exists on the list, but for now, we're just gonna keep it simple. At the least delete this, and we can just let's return true for now, or just a string saying like okay. All right, so we save this. Keep something in mind: when you are in the debug mode of the Flask command, it just reloads whenever you save the file. So we have a very up-to-date version, right? So first of all, we're just gonna run this first request with the hello world, and we're gonna run our /task, right? You can see it's an empty array, right? We don't have anything yet. If you can see this weird layout of my Chrome browser, it's just because I have a plugin that whenever it receives JSON, it shows it like this. But for doing all the requests like the put, the post, and everything else, I'm gonna use Insomnia, right? Which is an HTTP client. It's pretty cool for me. It's simpler than using Postman. Many people use Postman. I prefer to use Insomnia just because it's a little bit simpler, right? So I did prepare a collection here. I'm not gonna go through how to use Insomnia. I prepare a series of requests in order to demonstrate like everything that we have done so far, right? So we're gonna start with the post request, right? So I set up here a JSON body, right? It sets the header just to indicate to the web server that we're sending JSON, right? It's gonna be a post here. I choose the post method, and it's gonna be plural task, right? So if I attempt to send this, right, I think it was created. The ID is 0 for starting the new task. If I send it again, I'm gonna see increase in the ID just because it's a new one. Remember that everything is being stored in memory. It's just assigning the ID of the position of the task. If I say multiple ones, it's just gonna keep increasing the ID, right? For testing our next route, right, which is gonna be the list of tasks, it's gonna be plural here. Choose the get method. We don't need a body here. Headers are optional. I think that it recognizes that as we're not pulling data from the request, we don't really need to send any headers because it's not gonna check out the body for any JSON, right? So if we send this, I'm gonna see like all the list of tasks that I created, right? And if I post a new one, so you get here, I'm just gonna see one more, right? Pagination and you know, all the stuff is not gonna be covered in this video, maybe later, just to simplify and make this video like short enough, right? Forget a single task, right? The route is gonna be task, including a number. Let's start with number 0, right? If I go through this and I send it, I'm gonna see task 0, right? And I figure out to number 3, just gonna see the 3, right? We're gonna see that in just a second. I'm gonna change one of the tasks just to see it. And probably if I go with 33, I'm gonna see like a weird error because this element doesn't exist on that list, right? Just keep it back to 1. And we see the description. Then we have the put, right? The put element is basically updating a value, right? So I'm gonna update the task number 1 and I'm gonna put here task name 1, right? I'm gonna submit this. It's gonna fill the new information with the task with whatever I send. Again, it's a JSON body with a put HTTP request. Just remember, I can check out the method of the request here, and I can, you know, just act upon it, you know, into whatever I want to do, right? So I'm gonna also update number 3, and I'm gonna say task name is gonna be number 3. I'm gonna send this, and then I'm gonna see each one of the ones, or let's first see all, right? If I check off all, right, I can see that the ID that was 1, it has a new name. If the ID that is 3, it has a new name, and all the other ones are kept the same, right? If I get a single one, which is gonna get 1, number 1, position 1, I see that it's this. If I get 2, I see the default values, and if I set off to 3, right, just gonna see the new value, right? And finally, last, I'm gonna check that delete, right? Is that delete HTTP request? I'm not gonna send anybody, singular, and I'm gonna delete the 3rd position, right? Remember, as is a list, I'm gonna delete one of the elements, and the elements from the from, they're gonna just fill back. So I can start like deleting 3, 3, 3 until the end of the list, right? Or deleting 0 for that specific purpose. So I see that now there is 1 less. Again, the IDs are remaining. I don't see the number 3, right? But I'm deleting by position. I'm referring to position. So I'm not referring by ID. We can change and enhance that if we're using like a database or something of a similar data structure. But we're not gonna fall into that for now, right? So I'm gonna delete the first one, or I'm gonna delete the 4th one. I think we have 4 1, yes. If I send this, now see that we're left with ID 0, 1, 2, 4, and 6, right? If I choose to delete again the 4, again, it's gonna work because I'm deleting by position, not exactly by the ID that we created for each one of the tasks. It's just gonna delete whatever is in that position. Cool, so this is a very basic version of a REST API using Python and Flask. As you can see, it's like super simple. It took me just a few minutes to put together. Still, it's very workable. It has some of the things that you will use in a production version of a REST API. I'm gonna continue the series of these videos to enhance this code and make like better versions with authentications, connection to maybe like MongoDB or Postgres servers. I will follow up on that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you can like, share, and subscribe. It will be really good for the channel, and see you in another episode. Oh, before we say goodbye, I promise to put this into a GitHub repo. Let's do that. Let's do that first. I'm gonna go ahead and create a new repo in this GitHub arc that I just created. I'm just gonna call this the same name of the library, right? Create this, it's gonna be public. Create repo, It's gonna be like super fast. I'm just gonna do this whole thing. See if it works. Oh, no, sorry. I don't want to track like those .id and pipe. So I'm just gonna touch, git ignore. I don't want to blow up all this crap, right? So I'm just gonna put this here. Also venv, right? Status, right, add first, first commit, right? I'm gonna add this remote, sorry, this origin main. Perfect. So almost sure to include the link of the repo for you guys to follow up. Thank you for listening. Again, make sure to like, subscribe, and share if you like the video. Put any comments if you want to see any new videos or any specific, or you have any specific questions regarding this. Thank you.